Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, here in the Civic Centre and those watching on YouTube. Thank you for attending this meeting tonight of the Cabinet, Wednesday, the 16th of June 2021. For those that don't know me, my name is Councillor Paul Foster. I'm the Leader of the Council. I'm the Chair of the Cabinet. Councillor Mick Titherington is the Vice Chair of the Cabinet and the Deputy Leader of the Council. In accordance with the current regulations, members of the Cabinet are attending in person here at the Civic Centre. Also present with us here are officers required to support the meeting. Only members of the Cabinet present in the Civic Centre are actually entitled to vote. Other members of the Council, if they're not here in the Civic Centre, are dialing in via Microsoft Teams to observe or ask any questions. If you're in the Civic Centre and should you wish to speak, please just indicate as you normally would at the desk, and please do have your microphone off when you're not speaking. Any members not in the Civic Centre on Teams, please also do keep your microphone on mute and use the raise your hand function if you wish to ask any questions at the appropriate time. Reports will be presented by the relevant portfolio holder with support from officers, and I will then bring the item into Cabinet. Once Cabinet has considered the report, I will invite questions from other members. Please note that this meeting is recorded and live streamed via YouTube. The web link for this is displayed on the agenda of the meeting, and it's also on the Council's website. Thank you, and we now formally open the meeting. Agenda item 1, apologies. The Cabinet's all here, Chief Executive, so there are no apologies. Minutes of the last meeting, agenda item 2. We have the minutes of the meeting in front of me for approval. Do we have a proposer and a seconder? Thank you. Any questions or comments on the minutes from any members on Cabinet? Any questions or queries from any members not on Cabinet? Okay, all those in favour then? Well, that's unanimous, thank you. Those minutes are approved. Declarations of interest are agenda item 3. If a member has a pecuniary interest, they're required to leave the meeting completely. The member can rejoin the meeting following the completion of the agenda item. Do any members of the Cabinet have any interest to declare? Thank you. Agenda item 4, the Cabinet Forward Plan. As we've discussed previously, the Cabinet Forward Plan is updated on a daily basis at times. It now is available live on the website, and as you can all see, there is 12 pages. There's an awful lot of information on there, and it's a busy year ahead. Do any members of the Cabinet have any questions regarding the Forward Plan? You'll all note as well we've added on the lead members, and all lead members will be asked to present to Cabinet at least once during the new municipal year, so between now and March. Any questions from members not on Cabinet? Good. The Forward Plan is therefore noted. Moving swiftly on. Agenda item 5, lead member roles. Bear with me a second. So Cabinet colleagues will recall that we appointed some, or Council, sorry, appointed some lead member roles some months ago, and we asked for some heads of terms to be produced for the lead members, and these are in front of us tonight. Very much with all the lead members, I want the lead member to develop the role, so we've not been overly prescriptive of the heads of terms, and I'm really interested to see where this takes us, particularly in the next 12 months. You'll see that we've got a lead member now for youth and mental health awareness, which is Councillor Matt Trafford, social equality and justice, which is Councillor Jackie Elty, and climate change, which is Councillor Keith Martin. And I'm sure all colleagues will agree they're exceptionally important issues that we need to see some clear action on, positive action on, over the next and coming period. I think that the report is there for us to approve, and I'd ask if any colleagues have any questions or points to raise about the lead member roles. No? Do I have a seconder then? Second. Cheers, Mick. Any questions from any members not on Cabinet? Okay, Councillor Michael Green.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, colleagues. With regard to the lead members, this is a position which I support, the principle of having lead members. So I'm pleased to say that the council is doing this. However, I do have the concern, and we've raised this concern previously, with regard to lead members either currently or potentially in the future being members of the scrutiny committee as well. Because I do think there's an inherent conflict there. So whilst the response may well be that a lead member excuses himself or herself during the consideration of an item that's directly linked to their lead member role, I do think as lead members they'll probably have some input in terms of developing policy for the Cabinet collectively, and I think it's difficult to distance themselves as lead members and be able to give that effective scrutiny function, and B, from the point of view of openness and transparency, so that the public can actually see that those members would be behaving appropriately as members of the scrutiny committee, in performing their roles of scrutiny when they're also lead members. So I think there is a conflict there, and I would ask the Cabinet and the Council to consider that moving forward, and whether it's appropriate for whoever I'm not just talking about the individuals that are mentioned now as lead members, but anybody in the future that actually performs that role as a lead member, whether it's appropriate that they remain as a member of the scrutiny committee as well at the same time. Because in my view, I think there is a conflict. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Green. We take on board what you say, but I would suggest that members, some would suggest county councillors have, conflicts of interest sat in our in our scrutiny committee. Some would suggest parish councillors could possibly have a conflict of interest, but I don't buy it. It's up for individual members when they're sat on their individual committees that if they feel they have a conflict of interest, then they just declare that conflict of interest and they take no part and they take advice from the monitoring officer. For an example, climate change, Councillor Keith Martin. Clearly, if the scrutiny committee is scrutinising the climate change policy of this council, it's actually Councillor Martin could be one of the individuals being scrutinised. So he can't scrutinise himself, can he? So I do hear what Councillor Green says. It's something that I'm aware that the Chief Executive and the Monitoring Officer do look at closely on all our committees when all decisions are being made. And we will have a discussion with another discussion with the Chairman of the Scrutiny Committee, but it's down to individual members to declare when and if they feel they have a conflict of interest, not necessarily for Cabinet. Any other questions from any members? No. Right, so colleagues, we're asked to approve the terms of reference for the lead members and member champions as outlined in the report. I'm happy to propose. Councillor Titherington's seconded. Is everyone in favour? Perfect, thank you. Right, agenda item number 6, which is the Corporate Strategy Performance Report, Quarter 4. Now, this report went through the Scrutiny Budget and Performance Panel on Monday, and I thank them for the input. And there are a number of additional recommendations that the panel put forward, which I'll go through in a second. Basically, colleagues, I'm not wishing having this report being now scrutinised on 3 separate occasions between the informal Cabinet, now hearing Cabinet, and at the Scrutiny Committee to go through this page by page. Nonetheless, as you'll note, the majority of the main corporate objectives and overall performance of the authority in Quarter 4 was strong, particularly strong given the fact that we're still in the midst of a pandemic. Colleagues will also note that the KPIs and the trends on the KPIs are becoming interesting and powerful now, particularly as we've discussed around young people and the challenges that the pandemic is clearly and is causing young people. Now, we're not directly in control of all the outcomes of those KPIs, but I would suggest to colleagues that it's something we most certainly, as a council, need to keep a very, very close eye on. Other than that, I don't. Vicky, have you got anything you wish to add onto the report? No. So, any questions from members of the Cabinet on the performance report? Any questions from members not on Cabinet? Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm looking at paragraph 42 in relation to the Warden Hall project. It's on page 27, if that helps people. I noticed that that's down as being green, and I do recall that when the delegated decision was issued way back in January, the project schedule associated with that said that the critical advanced works would be completed by the 16th of April. Can I, on the basis that it's green, can the Cabinet member assure me that that critical work has been done and that no significant difficulties have been unearthed in those investigations? Thank you.
Yeah, lots of the preparatory work has now been done, and if you go on the park, you'll see we're just about at the point where the cafe owners are being moved out of the hay loft, I think that bit of the building is called, and we've set up some temporary accommodation for them. They're really excited. I had a briefing as recently as 10 days ago, and as far as the timings are concerned, we remain on track.
Thanks, Councillor Tomlinson. Any further questions? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a question of clarity with regard to the My Neighbourhood community hubs, and I know the request has come from scrutiny before now to be sort of clear what they're called, and on one page at least it's actually called three names: the Together hubs, community hubs and neighbourhood hubs. If we could just clear that one up, and I think in the Constitution they are down as My Neighbourhood community hubs with the reference, so it would be useful if we could just use that term and we know exactly which hub that we're talking about, as hubs are all over the place nowadays. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone? Right, good. No further questions. So the recommendations is we're asked to consider and comment on the report. We have. I'm quickly, just for thoroughness, going to read out the comments / recommendations from the Budget and Performance Panel meeting on Monday. They thanked myself and the Chief Executive and the Shared Services Lead for attending the meeting. They welcomed the Council's performance and progress made in Q4. They commended the face-to-face community engagement plan for the community hubs when it is safe post-COVID. They look forward to the long-term future strategy for the leisure centres being considered by the Council, wishes the Council well in partnership discussions to expedite disabled facilities grants, and asks to be kept updated on the progress. And finally, thanks all employees for essential services they provide to the community. I'm happy to recommend we commend and accept all those recommendations from the Scrutiny, Budget and Performance Panel. Is that accepted by colleagues as an amendment? Yeah. Can I have a seconder that the report's noted? Yeah. And anyone against? No. Thank you. Moving on, agenda item 7 is the HR and payroll system. The report in front of you is relatively self-explanatory. Currently, our HR and payroll systems are managed through Lancashire County Council, and I think it's fair to say, without wanting to be rude, it's not the greatest of systems that we currently utilise. The proposals within the report are that we appoint and use a system with Blackpool Council as an integrated HR system, along with our colleagues in Chorley. It's there in black and white to see. Colleagues will hopefully be comfortable that after the pre-meet that we had about this last week, that this item was going to be in part 2. we didn't feel it should be confidential and in part 2. So I thank the officers for publishing this in the main agenda. The recommendations that we have is to approve and appoint the appointment of Blackpool Council for the revision of a managed payroll service with integrated HR systems and all associated implementation, support and maintenance services, and to delegate the finalisation of the agreement with Blackpool Council to the Director of Governance. Do I have a seconder for that? Seconded. Thanks, Mick. Any comments from any colleagues on Cabinet? No. Any comments from the officers? Gary or Vicky? No. Any comments from members not on Cabinet? Councillor Ogilvie?
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of points for clarification, if you would. My understanding is this is now going to be a single joint contract between the two councils. The report mentions when South Ribble's current contract expires with their current provider, but doesn't mention when Chorley's expires. Do they expire at the same time? And if they don't, how are you going to manage that difference in the phasing? And the second point was not all the costs mentioned in this report are fixed, and yet we are delegating finalisation of the agreement to the Director of Governance. What financial limit is he going to be given in relation to completing those negotiations on price?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ogilvie. Yeah, the contracts end at the same time, so they are aligned, so that makes life much easier. In terms of the cost base, the financial framework is as that's set out in this report, and should we require any further costs or any further budgets, then we'd have to report back. We're anticipating that it will be within the costs that are reported.
Councillor Mrs Smith.
Thank you. I think the Chief Executive knows that I welcome this. I've spoken about it quite a few times at Shared Services, so I think it's something that we have needed to do. And I do agree with you that I think some of the services that we have been receiving in recent times from the county have not been up to speed. They did outsource it themselves some time ago, and I think that's where it went slightly awry. So I think it is good that we've actually got together now on this particular issue, and I welcome the fact that it can work with Blackpool as well. I think that will be a good thing. So I'm all in favour of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Smith. Any other comments from any members? Right, okay, so we've had a proposal and a seconder to accept recommendations 2 and 3. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. In a second, agenda item 8, empty property policy. The Deputy Leader, Councillor Mick Titherington.
Thank you, Chair. You will see from the report that the policy was last reviewed in 2013. It's therefore timely for a review to take place, and it was found that minor changes needed to be made, and also to take account of the demise of Methodist Action Northwest. I'm seeking Cabinet approval of the updated policy. I believe members will agree that the policy is laudable in its objectives, the prime aim being to bring back properties onto the housing market, increasing our housing stock to provide homes for those seeking places to live. The reasons why properties become empty are many and varied, and the reasons that they stay empty for long periods can be complicated. As the report points out, the legal route can be tortuous and consumes a lot of resource. Indeed, the whole process in relation to this matter takes up a lot of officer time and energy. Therefore, the sensible and right approach described in the policy is to work with owners to see how we can help to bring those properties back into use. We have a good track record in this regard, with the strategic housing team intervening when taking account of impact, risk and public interest. The revised policy builds on that and lays out the steps that we will take and what we can offer owners by way of help. Inevitably, there will be occasions when we have to revert to the legal route, and that procedure is laid out in the policy. Members are aware that last year we introduced an additional premium charge for council tax for properties that have been empty for more than 2 years, in an endeavour to dissuade owners from leaving properties empty for a long time. We all know that empty properties can attract vandals and can be a blight on the landscape and adversely affect communities. So that the policy is as laid out there, I believe sets out the right approach that we should take in this regard, and I commend to Cabinet for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mick. Just a point of clarity from me, because of the, I do apologise to you all, because of the late addition of an agenda item, that is actually agenda item 9. We've just gone to it. We'll continue on agenda item 9. Now we'll move back to the new agenda item 8 in a moment. I make no apologies for getting exceptionally frustrated when last minute papers come forward, but we're actually on agenda item 9 for thoroughness for the minutes. But thanks, Mick. Understood why we are where we are. It's good to see the policy updated. It is always frustrating that there's empty properties within the borough, and it is an exceptionally complicated process in going down any other route, legal routes, as we know. There's not that many empty properties that have ultimately been brought back into use over the years. I'm happy to second the report. Any other questions from members on Cabinet? Any questions from members not on Cabinet? Councillor Bretherton?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at page 55, and I'm curious about the grants that are available. It says there that there's grant assistance available of £4,500 per bedroom. I'm just wondering where that money is coming from. Is there a particular reserve, and how much is the reserve? And are we publicising the fact that there are grants available? Is there a list of potential properties that are eligible for this grant, if they've properties that have been on the market for over 12 months? Because it could be an incentive for homeowners or potential buyers to be able to take advantage of that grant to bring properties back into use, because it isn't a good thing. I agree completely that empty properties left for a long time could be a blight on the landscape for neighbouring residents as well. So it is important that we do bring them back into life. But I'm just curious how we're publicising that grant, and if somebody could answer the questions. Thank you.
Well, I think the conditions attached to how you would qualify for the grant are in the policy. The properties have to be empty for 5 years. I think you're right. I mean, it is there for an incentive to get these properties back on track. There are certain conditions that have to be met in order to qualify for that grant, and they have to be let out at local housing association assessment rates. In relation to the money that's available, frankly, I don't know where. Well, oh, is it in the report? Oh, yeah.
It's all right.
Yeah, it's 39,000 is left in the capital programme, essentially. Yeah, and the report says if we get more demand, we'll have to come back to council for more resources. But we've actually spent nothing in the last 2 years on this.
So, are we publicising?
We probably wouldn't normally publicise. The way that we would use it more probably is to deal with thorny issues and thorny problems in communities. It's where you get a particular house or facility that requires some help. They come along infrequently, and that's how we do it. That's how we normally do it.
Just for clarity. Sorry, just for clarity, did you say it's 5 years? It's got to be empty for 5 years. I thought it said over 12 months, but
if for the grant, it's got to be let for 5 years after the grant.
Yeah, it's to let for 5 years, but the actual period for it to be empty to qualify for it, am I right in thinking it's 12 months?
Jen, do you want to come in here?
Yeah, it's 12 months. And just regarding advertisement, what we've got is our council tax team give us a list every month of all those properties that are empty, and that's how we're going to target the work. So those houses that we think are causing concern to residents, we're going to prioritise, and then those ones that have been empty longer. So we're going to look and we're going to get this list and prioritise and advertise via that with letters and contacts to the owners of the properties.
Can I just come back in? So, whilst I accept that point, many assets whilst empty aren't a blight. And it's really complex persuading people that actually their home is a blight sometimes. So it's not always easy. What would normally happen is all members in this room and in the meeting will know where those issues are. They'll know particular properties, and they'll be the ones that will target where they are causing issues, because you'll know them. So you just need to raise them with us.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Jen. Councillor Phil Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously the council has a list of the 45 properties anyway that are in the report. My question really was with regard to the £4,500 per bedroom. If it's got 2 bedrooms and 3 bedrooms, is that multiples of? That's what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, well, it does say the available, the grant assistance available is 4,500 per bedroom.
Thanks, Mick.
Per empty property.
Cheers. Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question on page 51 about why our property is being left empty, and it's the new writing in red, and it said the estimated number of empty domestic properties over the past 6 months in South Ribble in January 2021 was 767. Will this number be updated very regularly on this report, or is it something that necessarily needs to be in the policy?
Well, it will be a moving figure. I mean, it'll be rolling over. I mean, you would hope that they are coming down, but I mean, you know, as I said in the report, sometimes, I mean, not all empty properties, you know, they're empty for sort of valid reasons. Some of the other, you know, because of, you know, family crisis, bereavements or whatever, or finding the owner. And some of the other issues are quite complicated. But the housing team the strategic housing team are continually looking at these figures. I mean, and that's why we've got that policy. So I mean, it is a continuing process. I mean, I agree. I think we all agree is that, you know, the number of empty properties there. Well, I did. I found it, you know, quite a shock. But I mean, it is what it is, and but the policy is there and it's been devised to try and get us to sort of approach the owners with a view to getting them back in and getting them on the housing stock. So yeah, it's a continuing process.
Thanks, Mick. Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I think as Jem mentioned earlier as well, they get monthly council tax reports as well of the number of properties that are empty. And it says within the report, Mick, doesn't it, that they target those that are over 5 years and particularly over 10 years. And they do try to be as proactive as we possibly can. Okay, any more questions from anyone? No? Good. So, Mick, you've asked us to approve the updated empty property policy of 2021. I'm happy to second that proposal. Is everyone in favour? Great, that's passed, thank you. Right, so just to confuse matters now, we're going to go back to agenda item 8, which is the urgent business that we agreed to bring forward, which is the town deal professional team appointments. The report, colleagues, is fairly detailed. The town deal, as we've stated before in Cabinet and also in Council, has some exceptionally challenging milestones and particular timeframes that we need to meet. And one of the concerns that we have, both as a town board, but also as the accountable body here in South Ribble Borough Council, is we need to get the consultants appointed ASAP, particularly the quantity surveyors, so we can start doing some detailed work about the costing exercise, which we're required to submit towards the beginning of next year. We could have waited until July. We weren't prepared to wait till July, and the proposal is therefore in front of you to approve and request to appoint the consultants on the town deal project via a delegated executive member decision to be made by myself, and that Cabinet notes the forecast expenditure of up to £200,000 against the £2.774 million capital budget approved by Council back in the 19th of May. So the figures that are in front of you today, colleagues, are as per were produced and presented to Council. We reiterate that with the accountable body, and all procurement must follow wherever possible, unless we waiver that, the Council's procurement regulations. So I think the report is detailed in explaining why we are looking to do what we are looking to do. We can't afford any slip-ups on the town deal, so we want to get the QS in place as quickly as possible. And I professionally and personally feel that the quantity surveyor appointment is one of the most critical that we need to get in place. So happy to recommend that to colleagues. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Mick. Any comments or queries from any members of Cabinet? Councillor Tomlinson.
And like most members in this room, I'm sure I'm really supportive of the town deal and the potential it has, certainly for Leyland Town Centre. And in obviously supporting this, I think the point to be made is that the timetable is not one of our setting. This timetable is being set by Whitehall and the government. So if sometimes it does look as though we're doing things a little bit quicker than we might normally do in local government, I suppose many people would say that's a good thing, that we're doing it quicker than normal. But it is not our timetable. And I know there's been some publicity about this week on social media, and some people have commented at the speed at which we're working, which did surprise me, but nevertheless, they did comment at the speed. But for the third time, I'll say this is not our timetable. We've just got to stick to it and get on and deliver.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. I wholeheartedly agree. I don't mind working at pace. I like to work at pace. I don't accept excuses that local government shouldn't work at pace when required, but it still needs to be done in the appropriate manner. The town deal is going to have to be worked on particularly quickly. We have no choice in that. We either do it or we lose the investment. So, and we're not going to lose the investment. So I agree wholeheartedly with what you said, Matthew. So any other comments from members not on Cabinet? Councillor Phil Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We're obviously supportive of this and supportive of the tight timescales, to be quite honest. And whilst we will have to work to the tight timescales, I think that is a good thing in general, to be quite honest. The sooner we get moving on it, the better it's going to be for the people of Leyland, the better it's going to be for this council, to be quite honest. So I think the tight timescales really do focus the mind.
Phil, any other comments? Right, okay.
Can we just be clear? This is for submission of the business case. This won't be to start the spending on the scheme. This is for submission of the business case.
Yeah, we've got about £2.8 million of spend that we budgeted for the next 10 months to get the business case established, of which I'll remind all members, South Ribble's risk in the event the government doesn't award the contract. But I'm reiterating what I've said previously. So it's been proposed, it's been seconded. Is everyone in favour? Thank you. Let's move on. Agenda item 10, Community Hubs update. Councillor Aniela Belinsky-Gelder.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank the officers, in particular the Director of Communities, for this report, as promised, an annual update of the new community hubs. This report provides an overview of the community hubs over the last 12 months. The 5 community hubs are now meeting regularly. They're more autonomous than they've ever been, and the chairs and vice chairs have more authority and may sign off spending on projects. And as cabinet member, although I like to keep up to date with what's going on, the hubs make all of the decisions themselves regarding projects and proposals. I'd like to highlight one really positive outcome of this autonomy. With the support of officers of all the hubs, they've established 2 very important task groups, the Social Isolation Task Group and the School Readiness Task Group. These 2 groups have arisen organically through discussions between members and officers, and I'm really pleased that this space has been provided for members to decide themselves what is important, and equally that members are taking the opportunity to fill the gaps and are working together on behalf of the communities in South Ribble for the older and younger residents. The list of volunteers for these 2 task groups is listed in the tables of the report under point 22 and 24. This is evidence the model of community development being trialled is led by a grassroots, not dictated to by managers and the cabinet member. The officers have been fantastic in identifying and communicating cross-cutting themes, pulling interested parties together for the benefit of our communities. The list of officers, as well as their geographical areas and their themes, can be seen in the table at point 11. We can see that officers are sticking closely to the outcomes of the cross-party community review, because at point 17 there's a list of the 7 key areas which all parties determined were important key areas in any given project, and the chairs were sent a letter provided in the appendix on the 25th of March reminding them of the community hub key areas. In terms of public engagement and communications, a range of methods is now being used, including social media, namely Facebook. The links are also provided in the report to promote both the officers as a contact and the projects in each area. The first newsletters have gone out and the links are provided in the report. Newsletters may be printed and placed in local notice boards around the borough. In addition, the Community Hubs team is about to begin a series of community conversations around the wards to jumpstart our community engagement element. All of the hubs have expressed an interest in participating, which is really excellent news. And I'll also be asking the hub chairs to start discussing the format of their public-facing meetings moving forwards so that officers can begin to prepare. Finally, all community reports moving forward will have budget information so the Cabinet can see what money is available, what is proposed to be spent and how projects are progressing. The financial information also provides the details of the Boost Fund, and I'd like to see a little bit more information in here, as many of the projects within the Hub Action Plans are not presented in financial terms, meaning that the total available is not a true figure actually for 21-22. Overall, I'm really pleased with the new community hubs. The officers are working really hard, writing reports, observing community days, organising community conversations, and now project managing the projects announced with the Community Boost Fund. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all the officers, and now as a Cabinet to note the progress of the community hubs to date and to support the development of community hubs over the coming months as COVID restrictions are eased and the public engagement is reinstated. Those are the recommendations. I'd also like to ask, because I've just had a quick flick through the report, Councillor Smith before mentioned that it calls the hubs different things. Because I've had a quick look, I'd be interested to know for my own information whereabouts it's not called community hubs in the information. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks, Aniela. Yeah, I think in the report under paragraph 22, the names are there. That's the name. That is the correct names of the community hubs, isn't it? I won't read them all out, but that is the correct name of the community hubs. If anyone sees anything else written down that's different to that, then please feel free to email Gary and bitterly complain like we do. but that's the names, Phil. That's the correct terminology for the community hubs as under paragraph 22. Interestingly, Anya, the comms is good. I thought the newsletters were really helpful, and it's going to be really interesting to see how they perform on social media. And I do thank the comms team and all the individual officers within the communities team for the work they did there, because it was a good piece of work, and it's now interesting to see if we can use that paperless technology and get that message out to the community. I'm also with you on the budgets. I do struggle to understand why it's so difficult to monitor the budgets on the community hubs, and that's something that clearly the Cabinet is keen to monitor. It's not all about budgets performance, but it's key, we need to monitor those. But I'd also say, Aniela, that to all the chairs of the hubs, don't let budgets stop any community initiatives, and all they need to do is come speak to you. And if there is additional budget requirement for their communities, then they come and speak to us about it. And, we've mentioned this all the time. We have a budget set, we have policy set, but it doesn't mean that we're not looking for new, alternative, different community initiatives, because particularly post-COVID, I do feel we've got to be fleet of foot. So happy to second the proposals, recommendations that you've put forward there. Any comments from any other colleagues on Cabinet? Any members not on Cabinet? Councillor Sharples?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just some insights from a Chair's point of view. I'd like to commend the Cabinet member and officers for all their hard work in bringing the community hubs to fruition. As Chair of Leyland and Farrington Community Hub, I think I've got that right, I am pleased with the progress we are making, the ever-increasing involvement of members and the support we are receiving. The planning meetings are vibrant and productive now after a slow start. Pandemic had its effect. The area profiles are useful and informative. Our working groups are engaging with increasing numbers, and the first newsletter is spreading the word. All of this means we are making huge strides, and we are engaging with more and more individuals and groups in our communities. The outstanding work by officers, particularly our CDOs, has made a tremendous difference. I think we have a wonderful opportunity to engage and interact with our communities to not only deliver on their priorities, but also to give them the autonomy and ownership that will allow them to flourish and develop around the 7 key areas agreed by Cabinet previously. I think it's important to recognise, though, at this point that change doesn't happen overnight, and I would encourage members to take up the challenge of developing the hubs to meet the criteria for the 12-month pilot evaluation. There's no doubt in my mind that our communities will not only benefit in the short term, but will themselves help drive things forward in the long term. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Sharples. Totally agree. Any comments, Daniela? Yeah. Councillor Wharton-Hardman.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak, as you and other members will be well aware, I was a big critic of the formation of the new hubs when obviously we got rid of Central and combined it with Leyland. However, having met with Rebecca Heap last week and discussed at length with my fellow ward councillor, I want to take this opportunity to actually say I was wrong on that occasion, and actually it is really, really pleasing to see the progress being made by the hubs and the way they are now moving forward to actually show progress and actually show things happening for the benefit of all residents. So I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the administration and the Cabinet member for the way the hubs are now functioning, and I look forward to playing an active part within Leyland and Farrington Hub moving forward.
Thank you to both Councillor Sharples and Wharton for your feedback. Feedback's always welcome. Anyone's welcome to come and speak to me or contact me directly about anything that's going on in their hubs, like Councillor, the leader, Paul Foster said. So, yeah, thank you very much for your feedback.
Yeah, thanks. And I've noticed the Leyland and Farrington Hub did some really good consultation down at Moss Side in the last week or two with members and officers, which was pleasing to see actually out on the ground. And I note Councillor Wharton-Hardman is I think the chair of Farrington Parish Council currently, Paul, and so we're going to try and work much closely with the parish councils, and it's maybe something you can assist us with as a chair on how we do break that and sort that, because that is a real priority for the local authority. But we thank you both for your strong words of support. Any other question, Councillor Phil Smith?
If you'd like to clarify the point about the names, on page 68 it's called Community Hub. On page 69 it's called My Neighbourhood Hub. My Neighbourhood. On page 69 it's also says Community Hub, and page 22 it says Together Hub, Community Hub and Neighbourhood Hubs. So it's not criticism, it's just to be consistent and let everybody understand what they are. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Any questions for anyone? Right, so the recommendations are there, Aniela. Everyone happy to support the recommendations? Thanks for the update, and we look forward to the next update, Aniela. Thank you. Agenda item 11, as we move on, the Revenue and Capital Budget Monitoring 2020-2021 Outturn Report. Councillor Matthew Tomlinson.
Thanks, Leader. 3 times a year I come to Cabinet with our quarterly report on budget, and at this occasion it's to give the final outcome of the last financial year. And in what must be a financial year, or indeed a year like no other, members will see that we've managed actually to come out with a surplus. So obviously at the end of the year we're showing a significant underspend, but it has to be considered this was against a budget set in February of 2020, before most of us had considered what this coronavirus might be. The report also recommends to Cabinet how we might utilise these underspends in the coming years. But before we get to those recommendations, I'd just like to refer and expand on some of the reasons for those underspends. The report does go into quite a lot of detail, so it is there for members to dissect as they see fit. But there is one undeniable fact, and that's that COVID-19 overshadowed much of what we did during the last financial year. In fact, it meant we simply couldn't do some of the business we would normally do. And so it didn't come as any surprise to me, and probably doesn't to majority of members, that a big chunk of the underspend is in the neighbourhoods and development budget, and you can see how that's broken down in table 2. However, we have to recognise that in that time we were doing some incredible work supporting the most vulnerable of our residents. Many of our staff were seconded over to implement our work around COVID-19 support. Thousands of residents contacted, food parcels delivered, prescriptions picked up from chemists, and welfare calls made. And it's really gratifying that just this week we've heard about those people's work being highly commended in the government's recent OPSS Regulatory Excellence Awards. I'm sure that all members, not just the Cabinet, will recognise the sterling work our staff did in the most challenging of circumstances and extend our thanks. And Table 2 does identify some of the savings we've made in staffing this year and some of the reasons why. There is also a more detailed appendix that we also include in the report about staffing vacancies and the various reasons why we may not have filled all the positions we'd like. As I said, some of the staff have been diverted to other work, and clearly recruiting during COVID has come with some very unusual challenges. There's some narrative to back up those figures on page 91 and 92. Members will have heard me speak before about the flurry of COVID-related grants we've received in the last 15 months or so, and I did promise to come with a complete summary of them all. I've still not been able to do that because the grants are still not complete and they're still not being spent, but I will at some stage in the future, when we feel it's appropriate, come with a complete breakdown of all the money we've received from central government and where it's gone. But you can see on page 96 that the council itself has received a number of grants to support us during this time. Some have come in at very short notice, and some with little or no guidance on how we ought to be spending it. But bullet points 38 to 48 attempt to give a flavour of how those grants have been utilised. The vast majority of grant money we've received has been to support local businesses, and I believe we've dealt with those in a professional yet sympathetic way, and these are shown on page 98. It's important to emphasise that all of this money is to support local business, and then at the end of all this, any unallocated grant will be returned to the government and not retained by the council. Moving on to the reserves, the table on page 100 shows a headline increase in our reserves of over £6 million, but it's almost entirely as a result of a grant we've been given to allow for the business rates holiday that's been given to the retail, leisure and hospitality trade. This is not funding which is available for us to spend. And finally, onto the capital programme, as itemised in Appendix C to the report. Clearly, this is one of the areas that have been most affected by the pandemic, and over a third of our projected investments into our assets just didn't happen. However, given the extraordinary year we've had, I'd like to celebrate some of the things we did achieve. Work to improve and open up Shrugs Wood in Leyland, starting the long-awaited Hayes Grange Coach House redevelopment. Playgrounds at Seven Stars, Bellisway and H Grange have been completed and others are on the way. Tom Hanson House in Bamber Bridge is now occupied by residents living in South Ribble's first council-owned accommodation for a generation. Support for Hull Village Hall, which has its grand opening next weekend, and we've made a significant investment in new, greener council vehicles and plant. Given all that was put in our way during the last financial year, I say that's a record that we and our staff can be proud of as we look forward to even more investment in the years to come. I'd now like to turn to the recommendations for what we ought to do with the savings we have accrued. I'm recommending we put £100,000 into the reserve to support the development of our local plan up to 23-24. The local plan is a key piece of work which we need to get right, but it does need adequate funding. I'm also recommending the creation of a new asset maintenance reserve of £400,000 to support work which may need doing to ensure our building stock and vehicles are looked after. It's not an understatement to say that much of the council's work in this area in the past around dilapidations and building maintenance has been very reactive. This approach can be more expensive in the long term and sometimes lead to short-term business interruption and inconvenience. This new fund will allow us to be more proactive and look after our assets in a more business-like fashion. Thirdly, I'm recommending to Cabinet the creation of an income investment reserve of £250,000 to support the initial cost of developing new income projects, such as, for example, an extra care scheme or an increase in our council housing stock. And finally, I'm recommending that the remaining £168,000 is added to the existing COVID recovery fund to assist us in what is clearly going to be the long, ongoing work of planning for a post-COVID, that has been going so well, post-COVID council and a post-COVID borough. I'm happy to move the recommendations in the report.
Thanks, Matthew, for your presentation there. I think it's really, really difficult for anybody to overstate what a challenge the last 15 months has been to this and every local authority, as well as to the entire community. As we're sat here today, it was so pleasing to see our officers recognised for the award, regulatory compliance through a pandemic, and highly commended for their works, but also in partnership with our friends in Chorley. So not only did they do it really, really well, really quickly, but they did it fully compliant with the regulations within our shared services. Shared services, if members recall, that we implemented fully during the pandemic. And I commend Gary from the Cabinet, from all members, our absolute thanks to all the officers for the works that they have undertaken and continue to undertake during the pandemic. Being on the front line has been horrendous for some of our officers, and they continue day to day to just get on with it. And, you know, the June last year, if you walked in here, into the Civic Centre, this entire room was a huge food bank for our community. but not just food, emergency, everything our community could possibly need was sat in here. And our officers, whether it be the community team, whether it be the finance team, whether it be the guys from down the depot, we're all sat in here, no complaining, getting on with serving our community. And each and every one of them is absolutely commending Matt. And it's good to see that the government has recognised this. Also, thank you to you and your team, Matthew, for bringing this report. If you remember, during the year, it was exceptionally confusing at times where on earth we were with these COVID grants that were being thrown thick and fast. A lot of the time, it wasn't stated whether they were ring-fenced or not. A lot of the time, Matthew, we didn't even understand the amount of grant we were getting or how we distributed it. We asked you to bring to us at the end of the year a consolidated report, which is now there. So thank you and Louise for that. And I make no apologies that there has been such a material movement, Q3 to Q4, end of year, because that's what we were expecting. We wanted to do this and do it properly. One of the things I'll also state is there was some concern, was there not, regarding the last issue of the business grants to some members of our community, but we must state publicly again, the government has initiated some significant fraud checks now, and it is holding up the issuance of certain grants to local businesses, and that is something again that is completely out of our hands. We don't have as much leeway as we did at the start of the pandemic. As read another one, yeah. And so we have to work within the guidelines that are presented, but we use full, and you use full flexibility, Matthew, and you still get our full support as a cabinet, and as does Councillor Flannery, with as much flexibility as we can possibly have with the support of our community and our businesses. It's also pleasing to see how well the community infrastructure, public infrastructure, and playground improvement programme has worked through the last year, and the fact that now at long last, Section 106 contributions from developers, where there is significant impact on all areas of the borough, from big developments. We're pro-developments, but these developments do impact all areas of the borough. So thank you now for using those allocations appropriately, Matthew, because I do recall a few years ago where some Section 106 contributions were returned to developers by this council because they were not expended in time, which I think is absolutely criminal. I'm happy to second your recommendations, Matt, within the report. I think the allocations are appropriate. And on that, I'm asking any other members on Cabinet have any additional questions to ask or points to raise. Any members not on Cabinet? Councillor Moon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, but I'm going to go straight off by disagreeing with your final statement that you think all the allocations in this document are appropriate. I want to speak specifically in relation to the Section 106 monies for Group 1 of the Royal Ordnance Site Exton, which we now all know as Buckshaw Village. This evening, Cabinet are looking to allocate £574,257 in the public infrastructure category of the 106 money that was generated from the Buckshaw Village development, and you're looking to spend it on various projects across South Ribble. The projects are including playgrounds in Leyland, a playground in Waltonley Dale, a park in Penwitham and a woodland in Penwitham. The agreement states that this money is to be used by the council for the purposes of making improvements to existing public infrastructure or the provision of any new public infrastructure which the council considers will benefit the development and/or Buckshaw Village. A constraint which the council have failed to detail in this report before us this evening, opting simply to state the words public infrastructure in the Section 106 table printed on page 125 in Appendix D. All the other entries in the table, you'll see a more transparent explanation of any existing constraints, such as providing facilities within reasonable proximity to a site, or in Lostock Hall in the Penwitham area, or within 2 miles of a development, and yet just the words public infrastructure on the Buckshaw Village entry. I would like to understand why the council has left out of this table such critical information on the constraints on the Buckshaw funding. Whilst there is no requirement to consult on this spend, Councillor Foster, you and your Cabinet have repeatedly told this council and the residents of South Ribble that you're transparent, that you're open, that you're honest, and that you'll put everything on the table, that you'll make evidence-based decisions. I know consultation is important to this administration. I've heard the word in here tonight many times. Consultation, community conversations, talking to people. If you cast your minds back to 2015, it's a while, there was a scrutiny call in on allocation of Curedon Valley Park Trust 106 monies. And whilst that entailed a wider process discussion, Councillor Titherington, as chair of that committee, and Councillor Tomlinson as committee members, they were involved when it was unanimously resolved that there was a need for consultation with the appropriate neighbourhood forum, as it was then called, when Section 106 money was being allocated. This was listed as a recommendation. There's been no consultation with any local member on this particular proposal, including Councillor Ogilvie and I as ward councillors. Had we not come across this ourselves, we'd still be completely in the dark. The residents of Buckshaw Village are watching this meeting on YouTube. What explanation can you give them for not seeking their views, not gathering any evidence from them on whether these spending proposals will benefit their village? They live there. They know their village. Surely they are best placed to say whether or not these schemes benefit them. Councillor Ogilvie and I have consulted. You are aware that we have consulted. And you know that the residents have unanimously stated that they do not consider that these proposals will be of benefit to their village. Councillor Ogilvie and I have been ward councillors for the residents in Buckshaw for the last 6 years. And during this time, we've been engaged in discussions about the appropriate spending of these 106 monies. We've met with members of the neighbourhood team and senior leaders in both neighbourhoods and planning, and been consistently advised that the geographical constraint on the public infrastructure spend creates a barrier. That means allocating the money is dependent on identifying projects within the development or those that we can demonstrate a direct benefit for Buckshaw Village. The legal advice before you this evening shows no direct benefit. Instead, it gives you a tenuous link between some of these schemes and the village. For anything beyond a playground, for example, Tarnwood, there's not even a tenuous link between a woodland in Penwitham and a benefit to a person on Buckshaw Village. I'd also genuinely ask for confirmation, please, tonight on Tarnwood, because to me it looks like a public open space rather than a public infrastructure, but I'd be happy to be advised on that. I think if it's public open space, it falls outside the category. So I'd like you to explain to me and the people of Buckshaw Village watching, what's changed in the past 2 years? What's changed that makes it now okay to allocate this money in the way that you're proposing to do? If the developers had wanted to provide Section 106 money to this council to spend anywhere on anything, they could have done that. Instead, they provided a lengthy 106 agreement that clearly identifies Buckshaw Village as the intended beneficiary of this money. And this evening, if you go ahead with this, the people of Buckshaw Village are not going to benefit from a penny. Not 1 penny of this allocation to these playgrounds, to your Penwitham Park or to your Penwitham Woodland are going to support Buckshaw. I'd ask that you defer Appendix D and you consult the people of Buckshaw Village, you talk to them and you ask them if they agree with your explanation for the benefit to their village. Thank you, Chair.
So, Councillor Moon, nice speech. You failed to state within your speech to the residents that are listening in that, and you've been slightly disingenuous in some of the information you've shared, that the council's legal officers have written to you and Councillor Ogilvie and made the position absolutely clear that everything that is being proposed here is absolutely fine and legal and in line with the agreements. And there's also clearly a total lack of understanding on what Section 106 contributions are actually for. Councillor Tomlinson, would you like to add anything?
It's clear that Councillors Moon and Ogilvie don't like this money being spent outside Buckshaw Village. But there's money from Golden Hill Ward, Section 106 monies being spent on a project somewhere else. There's monies from Earnshaw Bridge, Section 106 being spent somewhere else. I would just go back to the officer's legal advice. We took legal advice early on this, when this was first raised with us, and the legal advice is abundantly clear that what we are doing remains legal. And what we are doing, we're spending Section 106 monies that have been given to this council by house builders to benefit our residents. And what we're not doing is sitting on it and just waiting for a project that may or may not come about. In the report that's coming up on Strawberry Valley Park, Bent Lane Playground, one of those Section 106 allocations that's going to support that was paid to this council in 2011. And this council, the vast majority of which was run by the Conservatives, sat on that money. That is an outrage. That is an outrage, and we will not do that. We will invest in this borough. We will invest in our communities. And if our legal officers say that what we are doing is legal, then that is good enough for me. I really don't have anything else to say on it.
Thanks, Matt. The other point I would raise is that the purpose of the Section 106 contributions that the developers pay to the council are to support the local community that is impacted by the new developments. The local communities that have been impacted by Buckshaw Village is Chorley, is Leyland, some would argue is Bamber Bridge and Lostock Hall. It's that wide ranging. The community, 10,000 plus, you might smile, Councillor Moon. Are we saying that the residents of Buckshaw Village don't leave Buckshaw Village, don't use Worden Park, don't ever go out to Hurst Grange, don't use the Leyland schools, don't lose the Leyland doctors? You know, the purposes of the 106 contributions are to contribute towards the infrastructure of the local communities that are impacted by the development. Now, I'm just going to ask the Chief Executive to confirm publicly the advice that the Cabinet has been provided and the advice that you have been provided from the Council's monitoring officer that everything that is being proposed is legal and above board and most appropriate. And the Cabinet is making the appropriate legal decision.
Thank you. I can confirm that that is the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Quickly, and then I'm not having any more debates on this.
Yeah, I'd like to come back quickly because you've used the word disingenuous, which is not pleasant. I think it'd be nice if we could just keep it pleasant. I did state that there was a legal position. I stated that in my assessment. I think you're suggesting that it's a solid legal position. What I read was that there was a belief from a person that it may benefit. And I would just finally like to say, Councillor Foster, that if you believe what you've just said and you're confident in this, what have you got to lose by pausing and asking the people if they agree with you? If they've impacted, if they go to Leyland and here and there and everywhere, and you're so confident in this legal position, what have you honestly got to lose by just pausing and asking the people? I don't understand what you've got to lose by consulting when you hold consultation up as such a significant thing that this administration is going to do. Thank you for letting me come back, Chair.
We've made, Councillor Moon, a decision. A decision will be made tonight because the public infrastructure in our borough has suffered years and years and years of underinvestment, and we ain't allowing that to happen anymore. Now, more than ever, our public infrastructure needs improving. You might not like the decision. Your group put proposals forward to actually concrete over many of these green spaces that we're now investing in. That was your political decision. Your group made a political decision not to invest in any of these parks and open spaces for about 8 years. What I'm willing to do, we will write to all the residents in Buckshaw Village and we'll explain to them the decision that's been made. I'm happy to do that. And the reason that you're sat here tonight asking us questions is this administration publishes everything, not like your previous administration. Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Chair. And I also would like to commend and thank our officers for all their hard work during the pandemic and their recognition that they deserve. The Conservative group requested that I sought some legal advice from the LGA regarding the spending of the S106 monies, especially from the Buckshaw Village. The LGA have concerns over the allocation of S106 monies and would very much like to see all the paperwork involved in this decision. And so I asked the Cabinet to consider a proposal from the LGA would be to defer Appendix D part of this decision at the moment, as it would be a benefit to everyone.
I'm gobsmacked that you've just said that, Councillor Walton. You've had a discussion with somebody in the LGA and they've decided they want to look at our decision making. Our statutory officers, Karen, have made a decision. This will be subject to any external audit and any other view that is appropriate for local government. But please remember as well, and this is one of the things that does make me uptight at times, this council, particularly the Conservative group, was warned by the external auditors to start listening to legal advice from our officers. Because one of the reasons that this council, under the previous administration, got itself into so much bother with corporate governance was because members of the Conservative group would not listen to the advice of statutory officers. And the advice of the statutory officers is absolutely clear here. Gary?
Yeah, if Councillor Walton will supply me with that from the LGA, I'll take it up with the Chief Exec, because I think that's wholly inappropriate.
Councillor Ogilvie?
Thank you, Chair. I will cut very short what I was going to say, because Councillor Moon has covered a lot of it. But just to initially to answer the point that Councillor Tomlinson made about money lying around for a while, that is exactly the issue that this is all about. There are difficult constraints on allowable expenditure. We were told that those constraints were mandatory. We put proposals forward. We were not allowed by officers of this council to spend the money in that way. You've now been given effectively free range to spend it where you wish, how you wish, when you wish. Had we been given that advice, we would have done exactly the same. Now, I just briefly want to, I hear what you say about legal advice, but all we've received is 4 comments from the legal team. No legal language in it whatsoever. Justification 1 was that most council-controlled public infrastructure is within parks and green spaces. Well, sorry, that's irrelevant to the principle here that expenditure must benefit the village. That Worden Park will attract residents from Buckshaw. Yes, it does. We have no objection to legitimate allocations to Worden Park. In fact, the previous Conservative administration spent over £150,000 on the redeveloped, inclusive for all play area under a legitimate allocation from the Buckshaw.
Alan, Councillor, I'm going to stop you there, because twice now you have stated publicly that this allocation isn't legitimate legally, and I'm not having that. I'm not having that anymore. The officers have made a decision.
You're entitled to your opinion.
I am entitled to my opinion, and my opinion of this now is we've debated this enough. We've debated this enough. Alan, we've debated this enough.
I'll move off the legal thing. I have one other point to make.
Right, final point.
Right. So on the issue of consultation, you're currently consulting with residents nearby Hague Avenue play area as to what they would like on that playground. Why have you not afforded the same offer to Buckshaw residents on the expenditure of their money? It just seems double standards.
Again, Councillor Ogilvie, this is where you are being disingenuous to the residents of Buckshaw Village. It is not their money. That is the council's money that has been allocated due to a development that has been built in Buckshaw Village. It is not their money.
One final point, one sentence. Regardless of what the Cabinet approval is tonight, the final arbiters on this are the developers who made the contributions in the first place.
That's not true.
Right. If I could just clarify that. We are required on the agreement to notify the developer, notify, not seek their agreement, but it is, as Councillor Ogilvie says, in the gift of the developer if they feel that that is inappropriate.
Thank you for clarifying.
That's true, yeah.
So I take it Councillor Ogilvie and the Conservative group are going to do everything in their power now to prevent the development of these playgrounds in Leyland, and we'll keep a very, very close eye. And there's no need to come back, Councillor Ogilvie. Any other questions from anybody? Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's just a couple of things I'd just like to mention. You did, in your preamble, say that in recent times money had been returned to developers because it hadn't been spent, which was a disgrace. As far as I can recall, there was only one instance where money was returned to a developer, and that was because of a situation that occurred in Longton. And money was allocated to a system for a redevelopment.
Councillor Mrs. Smith, have you got a direct question?
Yes,
please.
I have.
I'm not asking for clarification on my points. I'm asking for questions on the report. Thank you. Can you quickly move on? I want to move on.
Excuse me, I thought we were allowed to make comment. And answer, you've actually said...
I do not require
no,
clarification.
excuse me.
I'm not going to argue with you, Mrs. Smith. You either move on or you won't speak.
I want to speak, please, and I wish to speak and correct something that you have stated, and actually put the facts...
Councillor Mrs. Smith, either ask a question or don't ask a question.
Right, okay. Do you agree with me that actually when the money was returned to Booth, the reason it was returned to Booth was because the development that was envisaged, which was the roundabout in front of St Andrew's Church, could not go ahead because of all the underground work that was actually put there and constrained the development, and therefore what was required to actually change that roundabout couldn't go forward, and that's why the money was returned. I'm sure you would agree that was a reasonable thing to do. The other thing I would just like to say, if I may continue,
Can you please move? This is the last point we're having on this item, and then we're moving on.
This isn't on that point. So please, would you allow me to say something?
Right, Councillor Mrs. Smith.
Councillor
Final
Tomlinson.
warning.
Councillor Tomlinson.
Final warning. Ask your question, and then we're moving on.
I'm
This is
going
the
to
final
do-
point on this agenda item.
Councillor Tomlinson this evening has actually said that Hoole Village Hall will be actually opening on the 26th of June. I'm just going to ask to tell him that that is not the case, because they've actually had to put it back, and it is now going to be opened in July, towards the end of July. So I'm sure that it would be helpful for him to know that information.
That's really helpful for the
I'm
Revenue
sure
and
it
Capital
is.
Budget Monitoring Report. Thank you. Right, Councillor Titherington.
Yeah, since we're looking at points of clarification, I think I should clarify my decision when I was chair of the Scrutiny Committee in 2015 to call in a decision that was made then. That the reason why we called that in would be in accordance with the call-in procedures at that time. And in relation to the consultation, I have to remind Councillor Moon is that when she was a cabinet member, she did make an announcement about refurbishment of playgrounds without any consultation with the ward members, because I was one of the ward members and Councillor Matthew Tomlinson was the other. So, I mean, we were talking about consultation. Let's be consistent.
Thank you, Councillor Titherington. Right. I think what members need to understand, there's a huge difference being a decision, being a political decision and a policy decision being made, and a decision being legal. The decisions, every decision in this report is legal. Members of the Conservative group might not agree with the policy of allocating Section 106 monies to playgrounds in South Ribble, but unfortunately, that's how it is. Councillor Tomlinson, you propose the recommendations?
I do, and I have to say I regret the way that the debate's gone, really, because this was for noting and commenting on our financial outturn through what has been an extraordinary year. And I thought there were some interesting suggestions that have come forward from officers and been agreed by me about what we do with the funding, the extra funding we're left with. Apparently no one is interested in that whatsoever, so that is a great disappointment. But the recommendations are there in the report. It's to note the outturn and then for Cabinet to approve the reprofiling of the capital programme. I really have nothing else to add.
Thanks, Matthew. I'm happy to second that. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you. Right, moving on. Agenda item 11, land remediation and playground refurbishment, Strawberry Valley, Bent Lane, Leyland. Councillor Matthew Thompson.
Thanks. I'm delighted, personally, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm delighted to bring yet another playground refurbishment to Cabinet. And this time it's for Strawberry Valley Park on Bent Lane in Leyland. The budget for the playground equipment has already been agreed at our budget meeting, and a tender process has now been gone through. As you'll see, it's now intended to award the contract for the provision and installation of this equipment to tenderer number 2, who scored 96 out of 100 during the bidding process. I would point out the last time any money was spent on play equipment on this playground was in 2002. And funnily enough, South Ribble Borough Council had a Labour leader then too. In moving recommendations 1 and 2, which I hope are straightforward for Cabinet, I'd like to pay tribute to the Friends of Strawberry Valley Park for their efforts in promoting this play area. Members may recall there was some local consternation when the previous Conservative administration back in 2018 decided to consult on the future of this play area, with a real possibility of allowing at least some of the land to be made available for house building. The Friends group was born out of that concern, and a real worry that the council weren't listening to local residents. And what a great job that Friends group has done. With the unstinting support of their local councillors Ken and Sue Jones, they've organised bulb planting sessions and litter picks, and they've really raised the profile of the area. Perhaps most impressively of all, they applied for and were granted £30,000 from the Lancashire Environment Fund to support the work we are now proposing. I'd like to offer them my congratulations on the work they've done so far, and I look forward and hope their relationship with this council can flourish in the coming months and years. Recommendation 3 is for Cabinet to go to full council for approval for the costs of the remediation, as the final costs for the work we need to do are coming out greater than the original agreed budget. I was brought up on Bent Lane, and I can see the famous Blue Bridge from my back garden, from where I live now. But even I had no idea that this site had been previously used as a landfill site. Ground investigations have revealed a level of soil contamination beyond the levels at which we can just ignore. We have a duty of care to people who currently use it, and certainly to the young people we want to be playing on there in the future. The costs of a remediation scheme involving capping the current levels with new clean soil has come out at around £200,000. Therefore, it's proposed to fund the first £61,000 using Section 106 monies given to the council by house developers, as detailed in the report, with the remaining funding required will have to be funded either from elsewhere in the capital programme or potentially by borrowing. Therefore, to be absolutely clear, I'm recommending that Cabinet approve the spending of up to £175,000 on playground equipment for Strawberry Valley Park, and that the contract is awarded to tender number 2. But we will need full council approving to spend the extra money on the remediation work as identified in recommendation 3. With that, I'm really pleased to bring these recommendations to Cabinet and hope that we can approve them. Thanks,
Matthew. Great news. And it's something that we've been supporting and promising the local community and residents we will deliver. So it's really pleasing to see that the final tender proposals are here and we're good to go, other than the remediation. Now, we have no option. We have a duty, whether we do the playground or not, to remediate that land. Therefore, we will undertake our duty and take the proposals to council to remediate that land as quickly as is possible. I've also spoken with yourself, Matthew, and officers about contacting the Environmental Agency as well, because there are at times funds available to offset the costs of the remediation, which we will look to clearly recover I'm more than happy, in fact it's my pleasure, to second the proposals that you're putting forward to Cabinet. Any questions from any colleagues on Cabinet? Any questions from members not on Cabinet? Councillor Ogilvie and Councillor Moon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm pleased to see this as well. I'm pleased to see, along with Councillor Moon, despite what has been said about us in the last item, we are more than happy to see any investment in the playgrounds across the borough. Our only issue is the source of the funding to pay for it. I noticed that there's some £14,000 of Buckshaw money included in this particular proposal, this report. And you were pleased to hear me say that I am more than happy with that. That's a perfectly legitimate allocation within the public open space category of the Buckshaw money, because it lies within the 2 mile radius as agreed in the 106 agreement. The only other point I wanted to make was the 139k borrowing. That's external borrowing, I presume, not some kind of internal shuffle between internal budgets.
Matthew?
Yeah, I think it does say borrowing in the report, and there is potentially it will mean external borrowing. Borrowing is incredibly cheap at the moment, but it depends. My personal preference, and I've made this clear, is that it isn't borrowing. There's always movement and slippage in the capital programme. That's my personal preference, but borrowing remains a potential way out.
It's really complicated, this, but if I can just explain it. So borrowing essentially means amortisation, Alan. So we would amortise it over the period in which we've restored it, and it could be 30 to 50 years out, because it's reclamation of a piece of land. So it'll be a small charge on revenue. In terms of physically having to borrow, we wouldn't have to physically borrow because we've got cash reserves. Yeah, it's a bit complicated. It's a bit complicated, but yeah.
Right, thanks. Councillor Moon.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a comment you made then with regards to the remediation works on the land. Obviously, in a previous life, I was Deputy Leader and a Cabinet Member. I was advised that we didn't need to remediate if we're not disturbing. So I just want to be clear that, is that what you're still saying to us? Because you said we'd have to do this remediation work regardless of whether we do the playground or not. My understanding, and I've no issue with it, I'm not against doing the work and doing the playground, but if my understanding, I was advised that if you don't touch the land, it's fine, it's not posing a risk to any residents. It's when you disturb the land that we then release the issue and need to remediate. So can you just confirm which that is?
Yeah, my understanding, if you go to paragraph 7, the option of not remediating the contaminated ground found on the site was rejected, as the council has a duty to take action where ground contamination on public open spaces exceeds recommended thresholds. So the information and the advice that the officers have given us, if it remains a public open space, it needs remediating. The other option we have is we shut the thing down, and we're not doing that. Yeah, come on, yeah.
Just say thanks for that, appreciate the clarity. I've clearly missed it in number 7, but just to point out, we seem to be getting very different advice, Councillor Foster, over the years, don't we? But thank you for that.
I couldn't possibly comment. Any other questions? Right, Matthew, just want to confirm those recommendations quickly, please.
If you're insisting.
No, okay. So just to be clear, that the Cabinet approves to spend the allocated 175 capital budget for the refurbishment of Strawberry Valley Park Playground. Number 2, to award the contracts for the refurbishment to bidder 2 in table 1. And number 3, Cabinet recommends to Council that the remediation work should be undertaken to enable the site improvements to be brought forward, and that the Council will be asked to approve a budget of £200,000 to support these works. All those, I've seconded that. All those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Sticking with you, Councillor Tomlinson, agenda item 13, the insurance of policy procurement.
Yeah, probably a little more of a dry subject than the previous 2, but nonetheless still important. And this proposal is seeking approval for a new way for South Ribble Borough Council to procure its insurance policies. As we work ever more closely with colleagues in Chorley via the shared services agenda, an opportunity has arrived to jointly go out to market in obtaining necessary insurance cover we both need in the future. I'd like to stress that these will still be separate insurance arrangements for each council, but there is the chance to save lots of staff time and ensure that we always have appropriate and timely cover by doing this exercise jointly. I have to say we have struggled here at South Ribble in recent times in keeping on top of our insurance renewals just because of staff capacity, and it seems to me that doing things jointly is an eminently sensible way forward. And Council is asked to agree to this general approach in Recommendation 1. Recommendation 2, Cabinet is asked to agree to the YPO system as detailed in the report, and there's some justification for that decision further on. And I'd particularly like to point colleagues to the monitoring officer's comments at the end of the report, should they need any further reassurance about this way forward. In Recommendation 3, we are asked in principle to agree with the weightings for any decision as laid out in the table towards the bottom of, I've written down page here and then I've not put what page number it is, but if people have got 135, thank you, Leader, there's a weighting table there. Chair, I'm not an insurance broker or any kind of expert in this field, but I do support this general approach to joint purchasing, which seems to me, in the current circumstances, to be eminently sensible. And I'd like to move all the 3 recommendations as set out at the beginning of the report.
Thanks, Matthew. Any questions from members on Cabinet? It's quite self-explanatory, I feel. Pleasing to see we're using shared services again. Any questions from members not on Cabinet? Councillor Ogilvie.
Just a very quick one, Chair. It says that the procurement will be a separate tender for each council's individual insurance portfolio. Is there no benefit in having a joint tender, and hence you effectively get the benefit of bulk buying?
Yeah, I think the complication, Alan, will come with the cross-subsidisation of risks. So each individual council might have a view about actually we're accepting a risk from another council and might not be prepared to do that. So the process becomes really complicated. I think what we're hoping for is I think we will get some economies of scale from doing it jointly. And we might likely get other people coming into the market because it's a bigger tender, the two together. The big advantage comes from having the same provider of the insurance. And the clarity around that and the administration that goes around that. So there will be some financial benefit from doing that, but that's why we're not tendering as single providers, single contracts.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting that it was, if you like, a joint proposal. It was 2 separate council proposals, but under the same banner.
That's what will happen. Sorry, just for clarification, that's what will happen. Yeah. I'd confused you.
Thanks, Gary. Councillor Phil Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, it's we've obviously got a shared service that has been effective for a number of years now, and this obviously seems to fit quite nicely into it. And I would be supportive of certainly sharing the insurance. What that does, of course, is spread the risk, and I'm sure the underwriters will be looking at the risk itself. So the more you spread the risk, the cheaper it will eventually get. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Phil. Any other comments from any of the members? Darren, no? Okay, we've had the recommendations proposed. I'm happy to second them. Is everyone in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay. Agenda item 14 is the exclusion of press and public. Unfortunately, I have to move that press and public be excluded from the meeting now for the following items of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Titherington. Okay, can you